So let's jump right in. Welcome to Porcelain Dolls, a cognitive behavioral approach to breaking through perfectionism and people-pleasing in women. I like that transition. That was worth the trip just in that. So if you missed it, because we're breaking through perfectionism, you get it? Okay. So this is the basic idea of what we're going to be talking about today for you guys. First, what is a porcelain doll? It's kind of vague, but it's something I made up for myself to describe a lot of similarities that I was seeing in this population that I was treating. So we're going to talk about what perfectionism is, how it's going to present in your clients, what people-pleasing is, and how it presents in your clients, the contributing gender issues that makes this a different issue for women than it does for men, and then what I call compassionate cognitive behavioral approach to treatment. Okay, porcelain dolls. Come on, little transition. What do they look like? What do you guys think of when I say porcelain doll? Shout it out.
Pretty.
Pretty.
Fragile.
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 Flawless.
Flawless. That's a good one.
Impression management.
Impression management. That's a good one. Other thoughts? When I think of a porcelain doll, I think of it as something really pretty, really flawless, but something very fragile. So I'm going to put it really high up on the shelf, and I'm going to look at it and appreciate it, but I'm never going to take it down. I'm never going to let my kids play with it. I'm probably not going to pack it in my suitcase so I don't get lonely. It's just going to stay up on the shelf, untouched, and pretty. So what do porcelain dolls do? Porcelain dolls are very often the kinds of clients that come into your office and you're very impressed with them. They seem very put together, they're very smart, they're very capable. Sometimes they're stuck in something that you feel like is going to be a really easy fix, if there is such a thing in therapy. They're going to look like a porcelain doll. They're usually very beautiful. They have their stuff together. What are the presenting problems that you're going to see? The DSM-5, even though it's new and approved, does not recognize perfectionism or people-pleasing. So we have to be really aware of what it's going to look like in the other issues or the presenting problems that we're going to see in our office. Very often I see perfectionism and people-pleasing, which I just call triple P because that is a dang mouthful. So when I say triple P from now on, you'll know what I'm talking about. You'll see it in women that struggle with depression, anxiety, eating disorders or other body image issues, or just disordered eating if they're not fully fledged eating disorders, and low self-esteem. What other issues do you guys see in your clinical practices or your internships, or what do you foresee seeing as presenting problems might have a root of perfectionism or people-pleasing? Yeah?
A lot of things anxiety related.
Anxiety for sure. You are going to have super, super, super anxious porcelain dolls in your office. Other thoughts? Man, I must be so good that I got everything on the list. It might present under anything: obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder. It's going to run the gamut. So my advice for treating porcelain dolls, first and foremost, is don't get taken in by them. They will very often be your favorite clients, even though I'm not supposed to play favorites. Because they're going to come to your office when you're scheduled. They're not going to be late. They're not going to no-show you. They're not going to cancel last minute. They're going to do all their homework. They're going to be really agreeable. But you have to remember, at what personal cost are they all these fabulous things? Because that's the root of people-pleasing and perfectionism, that it comes at a great personal cost. All right, let's talk about perfectionism. The definition for my standards of treatment are it's setting excessively high, sometimes impossibly high standards for yourself, and then having a really critical self-evaluation, in addition to a fear of how other people are evaluating you. How it manifests. You're going to have two different groups of perfectionists in your office. There's going to be high-functioning perfectionists and low-functioning perfectionists. Your high-functioning perfectionists are going to have a very strong achievement orientation. So I call these the doers. These people are usually highly successful. If they're students, they're going to get straight A's. They're going to have scholarships. They're going to be sterling scholars coming out of high school. They're going to be rapidly promoted in the jobs that they do. And very often, if you see them younger, or if they tell you stories about their childhood, they'll talk about being put on a pedestal. They'll talk about being the golden child, or the angel, or the one that their parents never had to worry about. So now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, you're going to get your low-functioning perfectionists. And these are the people that usually show a lack of follow-through of things. They're gonna fail out of school or drop out of school because they're not doing well. They're gonna quit a lot of things before completion, including therapy. So you have to be very well aware that this is going to be a risk as you're treating a low-functioning perfectionist, that if you give them homework and they don't do it, they might not come back just because they didn't do their homework. So when you give them a call and you say, I want to see you in my office, I don't care if you did your homework or not, you might have to go the extra mile with this. And then they're going to be losing jobs or dropping out of school, like I said. They're just going to struggle to finish or follow through with something because they just can't do it for a until they get paralyzed. The core of perfectionism. If people see who I really am, how flawed I am, how broken I am, they're going to reject me or abandon me. And so at the very root of perfectionism is shame. We're afraid that if you see me in all my glory, no mask, then you're going to reject me. All right, the benefits of perfectionism. When you're treating the triple Ps, you have to recognize that there are some benefits, because if we don't identify the benefits, we're going to have a really hard time getting this change to stick, because there's going to be a lot of reinforcement for these behaviors if we don't recognize them and then talk to our clients about them. Some of the benefits of being a perfectionist: you get things done. If you're a high-functioning perfectionist, you put the pedals to the metal and you achieve. You get lots and lots of praise and reinforcement for being a perfectionist. Now it's tattle on yourself time. Do I have any perfectionists in the room today? Isn't that funny how they seem to be attracted to graduate school? And therapy. You're going to see a lot of high achievers. You're going to see a lot of high achievers, especially, again, with your high-functioning perfectionist. And one of the benefits of perfectionism that is of particular interest to us as therapists is it provides protection from being a real person, which does provide some benefit, especially from people who have some kind of traumatic history or are afraid of being themselves. And so what we want to do is help them learn that being real is worth the risk. That's going to be your overall goal. Being real is worth the risk. Here's the cost of perfectionism, and this is where the costs are going to outweigh the benefits. You will become paralyzed. If everything has to be perfect and you just can't get something perfect, it's going to be really hard for you to follow through. It's going to be sometimes so paralyzing again that you're going to drop out of school, if you're going to quit relationships before they get too scary or too real. It's going to affect you in every aspect of your life. Next, it is exhausting. Has anyone ever been a tightrope walker or walked a tightrope? Can you imagine, even if you haven't, how much energy you're exerting to just not fall off? I went to the playground with my son the other day, and they've got one of those like really wobbly things that you try to walk on, and I could not even just keep my balance, nonetheless take a step. That's what it's like for a perfectionist. And not only are they walking on a tightrope, but they're walking on a barbed wire tightrope, juggling 16 balls at the same time. You're never going to feel good enough. None of us will ever be perfect in anything. We can be excellent, we can be great at something, we can be naturally talented in something, but we'll never achieve perfection. And so we're always going to feel like we're not good enough if we place all of our self-esteem, all of our emphasis on why we're a good person or not a good person on being perfect. One of the hardest things about being a perfectionist is that the high never lasts. You can achieve something fantastic. You can graduate from graduate school, and everyone makes a big fuss out of you and feel really great, and then a week later the fuss dies down. And you're thinking, okay, so people aren't paying attention to me anymore, I'm not getting reinforced for this achievement anymore. Okay, what do I do next? I've got to go write a best-selling book. I've got to go, go back for another degree. And if I have 17 PhDs, maybe people will finally love me. Next, you have the hardest part of being a perfectionist, and that's you're constantly seeking to fuel your self-esteem from external events, external achievements. And so no matter what happens, you're never going to feel consistently good. I'm going through this really fast. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll keep track of that. All right, so why is perfectionism so hard to beat and so difficult to treat from a clinical standpoint? First and foremost, perfectionists get reinforced for being perfectionists. Now, however many perfectionists we have in the room, which is like 85 to 90% of us are perfectionists at some level, maybe even 100% for those of you who are perfect to admit raising your hand and you're perfect. That we get reinforced for it. Our society is very capitalism, very individualism, drive, go get, achieve, 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 sometimes at the risk of not taking time to just be. So So a lot of times with my perfectionists, I'll make the distinction for them between being a doer and being a beer. Not to be confused with a beer. A beer. This is a little bit hard. So we'll talk about the difference between achievement and just personhood. There's a difference between them. Also, perfectionists serve a purpose for us. We like perfectionists. They do what we want, they do it well, they do it on time. They're the people in our group that when we slack off on our half, they pick it up and do the rest of it, so we still get an A. So perfectionism is so reinforced by family members, by friends, by church leaders, by religious orientation, by our professors. How many of you in this room, whether you're a student now or were a student years ago, felt the pressure to be perfect from your professors? Oh my heck yes, especially in graduate school. Okay, we're in Utah. There's a lot of LDS people here. We're going to get a lot of religious kind of digging in the heels because of this fancy little phrase right here that if I had $1 for every time I heard this, I could retire tomorrow. Be ye therefore perfect. A lot of times people, and especially LDS women, will confuse progress or progression with perfection. And they get really stuck in, no, but I'm supposed to be perfect now. God wants me to be perfect now. And try telling somebody, God's wrong. Don't do that, because then they will never come back. And again, people love a perfectionist. Why do people, for those of you who are perfectionists, why do you get reinforced for your perfectionism in your life, whether personal or professional? I'll give an example. Oh, back there.
You are low maintenance, high yield.
Thank you. That is the perfect way to say it. Low maintenance, high yield. As perfectionists, we're hyper conscientious. You don't need to worry about me. I got this taken care of, and I got this, and I did this, and I also made sure you guys got your dry cleaning. Low maintenance, high yield. That's perfect. Other examples. They can be specific or theoretical.
Like, oh, I can always count on you. You're so dependable.
Yes. I can always count on you. When I don't do my half of the assignment, you'll rush in and you'll say, it's okay. Yeah.
People like to be around you because you're always like happy or funny or like pleasant to be around.
Yes. Perfectionists are the world's best performers. They're the world's best actors. They have to be. They have to convince everybody all the time, I'm happy, I'm good, I'm competent. I never doubt myself. And if I do, then I need to go into a corner where nobody can see me and bawl my eyes out. But don't let anybody see. Who here has seen Frozen? I just watched it yesterday with my son, and I cannot get that stupid song out of my head. Let it go, right? Conceal, don't feel. I am in love with that song just because it sends us such an important message as perfectionists. And I watched the Oscars when they got the Oscar for that song, and it's a husband and wife that wrote it, and they dedicate it to their daughters. And the reason they wrote that song is so that they never have to feel bad about who they are, no matter what they are, what they do, that they're good enough. And so sometimes I'll get homework to go and listen to Let It Go. YouTube it. Come on, people, you can do this. And people that are perfectionists, when they hear that song, it's almost always followed by tears, especially for women, because they feel that. I have to conceal. I can't let it show. And when she finally sings, let it go, all of us are like, yes! Just let it go. Okay, now we're going to move on to people pleasing. Any questions about perfectionism before I go forward? Yeah.
The part where there's like the two kinds of perfectionists, there's the high functioning and low functioning. What makes the low functioning people low functioning instead of high functioning? Not like the behavior, but
Yeah.
why do we have that difference? Is it?
A lot of times it's, my perfectionism is so crippling that if I can't do it right, I can't do it at all. And the high functioning perfectionist will find a way to push through the perfection to deliver a product. Does that make sense?
So it's like an all or nothing thing.
Yes, it's all or nothing thinking is the world's biggest cognitive distortion that you will treat when you treat perfectionists. It's either all good or it's complete crap. And high functioning perfectionists can push through it even though they still feel like it's complete crap. I have to get it in because it's due today. Where low functioning perfectionists, if it's not perfect, I can't have this another professor. I can't do this. This would be so embarrassing.
How do the presenting problems differ for both of those?
They usually don't. That's kind of the kicker. A lot of times you'll get more low-functioning perfectionists that have depression, and a lot of times you'll get more high-functioning that have anxiety, but you'll see a lot of crossover. Other questions? Okay. All right, the definition of people-pleasing is an intense focus on only behaving in ways, saying things, sharing opinions that we feel like please others or agree with others, regardless of what you actually think, want, feel, need. And then an overwhelming concern with how people perceive you. How it's going to manifest with your clients. Your yes women. People that come in and everything you tell them, yeah, Carly, that makes total sense. So I start to worry if my clients never disagree with me. Because I know I'm not always right. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I can admit that for myself and it not damage my self-esteem. I'm not always right. So if they're, oh yeah, or if I say something that's hard and they don't respond emotionally to me, they don't get mad at me, or if they do get mad, they mask it. Next, people that don't want to rock the boat, don't cause me confrontation. Oh, my husband, yeah, he told me how awful I look today, and I just, yeah, I nodded my head and was like, yeah, I probably look awful. That didn't feel good for her. I can pretty much guarantee that didn't feel good for her, but she didn't want to rock the boat. She didn't want to cause a confrontation. Next, people who struggle with differentiation, whether it be with their parents, whether it be with their spouses, or whether it be with their own children. Anyone in their life that they become too enmeshed with enmeshment comes people-pleasing. I don't want to hurt you because if I hurt you, I hurt you. Next, people who have rules about being a certain emotional state, usually angry. Don't get angry. If they have that kind of a rule, they're usually some version of a people pleaser because they've come up with some rule of why anger is bad. Next, always be nice. And not just nice, nice! Like big nice. Did I put enough exclamation points? I'm not sure. And then finally, always checking to see if what they think, feel, say, believe is okay. Is that okay to say? That's a people pleaser. Did you think I hurt his feelings? I don't know, you were going a little bit fast last session, but I didn't want to say anything. That's a people pleaser. Okay, the core of people pleasing, very, very similar to the core of perfectionism. I have to go out of my way to please other people, otherwise they're going to reject me. They're not going to like me. They're not going to accept me. And then there's the belief that I have nothing else to offer. It's a negative core belief. I don't have anything else to offer but to make other people happy. So if I don't make other people happy all the time, then they're not going to accept who I am because what else do I have to give? So again, this boils down to shame. Shame manifests itself in so many different ways, but perfectionism and people pleasing are a really big shame protection. Okay. The benefits of people pleasing. Again, recognize the benefits so that we can karate chop them into pieces. Other people respond positively to people pleasers. Who in here will admit to themselves and to the rest of us in the room? You have to raise your hand if you just want to admit to yourself, is a people pleaser. Isn't it funny that there's so many of us that are both? The triple T. You make people happy, and that's really reinforcing. I feel good when I make other people happy. But what cost am I having for myself by making other people happy? Is it too much? Third, you avoid confrontation. Oh my heck, isn't it so nice to not have to fight with people? And that's kind of the motto of a people pleaser. Never get in a fight. Never say anything that's going to cause contention. I hear that word a lot, especially from my LDS clientele. Causing contention is bad. And that means don't get angry, don't disagree. Fourth, you avoid hurting people's feelings. And it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from you making people happy. Not only do you make people happy, you make sure that they're never sad. Because everybody else's feelings are your responsibility. The cost of people pleasing. Your needs get ignored. If you're so busy making sure that everybody else is happy, when do you ever get time to make people happy? Or to have people make you happy and make yourself happy? I use this a lot with my women who are people pleasers. There's a woman who goes to work in an orphanage in a third world country, and there's only so much food to go around, and it's never enough. And so eventually, the woman stops taking her portion of food and then distributes it to the rest of the children that she's taking care of. And she does that every single day until one day she wakes up and she can't get out of bed because she has no energy. She's been so malnourished for so long that she cannot function. What purpose does that serve for anybody? And that usually hits home with the people pleasers. If you don't take care of you, you can't take care of other people healthily either. Next, you can become a doormat. There are unfortunately people in this world who have a people pleaser radar, and they will zone in on you as a people pleaser, and they will manipulate you and use you for their purposes. And that makes you a doormat. Not in a bad way, like, oh, you're such a doormat, like accusatory thing that came up crazy. But you become a doormat because there are some people in this world that will use us. It's an unfortunate fact. You develop a ton of resentment. How many times have you had women sitting in a chair across from you and say, he just never thinks about my needs. I give and I give and I give and I never get anything back. Is that familiar? Is everybody getting deja vu? Okay. You're starting to tend towards a passive-aggressive kind of style to get your needs met. We all need to have our needs met. And if you're not doing it assertively, you're going to end up doing it passive-aggressively. When people refuse to be pleased, it's got to be my fault. If I was just nicer, if I just gave her more presents, if I was just nicer, then she would like me. But there's always going to be people in this world that you just can't please them. And people pleasers believe that it's because of them that the other people can. Next, people start to lose respect for you. How many people at least know somebody who's a people pleaser? Everybody? Do you struggle to feel connected to them or feel respect for them? I know I do. I have some people in my life that just bend over backwards for, flat out abuse, and I'm like, oh man, if I could give you a backbone for Christmas, I would do it. It's tough to see people like that, but eventually, I don't trust them anymore because I know they're not real, and it doesn't feel good to be in a relationship with people who aren't real. Hence the porcelain dolls. If I want to hug my porcelain doll, she's kind of cold to the touch, isn't she? And then you sacrifice your own self-growth and genuine, real relationships. If we never fight, how do we learn how to get along? If you never disagree with me, how do we learn to compromise on things? If you've never, go out of your way to be vulnerable with me, how am I going to connect to you? And although it does serve a protective function in a dysfunctional way, it does prevent you from being able to grow and learn and become something new. I found this as I was Google imaging pictures for my presentation, and I thought it was really interesting. Can anybody read that for me?
The more people you please, the more success you enjoy.
Now here we have this poor felled tree with a giant smiley face on it. What did this tree have to sacrifice to make somebody else happy? It's life. If that's not people pleasing, I don't know what is. I will lay down my life for you so you never have to have a moment of indecision. That's not healthy. If we have to sacrifice too much of what makes us be okay, be healthy, then it's too much. It's dysfunctional. Okay, so why is it so difficult to treat and hard to beat? First, it's reinforced. We like people pleasers. Yes? They're fun to be around. They give you stuff. They compliment you all the time. They lay down and no, you pick the restaurant. Well, I picked the restaurant the last 16 times we went out to eat. No. It's okay. Anything you choose, even though I hate Mexican food, we had Mexican food 15 times out of 16, you just pick. That's great. Again, it's reinforced by almost everybody, and not only our clients' lives, but our lives as well, and sometimes even reinforced by us. Don't you just love your clients that are really super sweet and just think you're the best thing in the entire universe, even if they're plotting your death in the back of their head? Right? We like people pleasers. People like it when they get what they want, and people pleasers deliver. People pleasers deliver, and that's reinforced. They're convinced, people pleasers specifically, that if they do things in any other way, it's mean, it creates contention, or it's unchristlike. Well, I can't disagree with my bishop. That's unchristlike, Harley. Okay, where do I go from there? I can't tell you Jesus is wrong. Think of a time when Jesus was contentious. Okay, the money changers, right? You have to work around that. You have to help them understand that saying no is not mean. And we'll get to that. And you're going to have to counteract years and 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 years, depending how old your clients are, and years of gender socialization. Gender issues? Women are socialized to be relationship monitors. We're socialized to walk into a room, and every single person that I know, I can pick out the people in this room that I know and the relationships that I have with them, and I can tell you the exact tone that we left on the last time I saw them. Hi, Marianne, how are you? I can pick out the last mean thing I said to them. I can pick out if we are in a good place or a bad place. I can pick out all the social things or the relational things, like Marietta getting married. I can remember all of these things about them because I'm socialized to put that away in this little storage tank that has a doily on it, just like Early Society tables. Because that's the way I've been raised. That's the way that my culture has socialized me. Secondarily and more intensely, women garner their self-esteem from their success in their relationships. My role as a mother defines who I am. My role as a daughter defines who I am. My role as a sister, as a wife. That our relationships dictate whether or not we feel good about ourselves. Women tend to be, and again I'm generalizing, tend to be socialized to be more to their social cues, social control, especially from other women. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've had a couple in session, and he's like, man, she just drops hints all over the place, and I just never pick them up. Like, just tell me, woman. Just tell me what you want. And so I have to tell them, you can't drop clues for your husband. You have to hit him in the head with a clue light board. Tell him. Just say it. And it's so hard for women because we're so used to getting what we want in subversive and covert ways because we don't, it's mean to ask right out for what we need. And I can't go to my boss and say, I'd really like to get a promotion. I've done a really great job in this company and I feel like I deserve it. How many women, just thinking about saying that to your boss, go, I can't do that. Your perfectionistic and people-pleasing clients will feel that way when you ask them to be assertive. All right, relational aggression. If you don't know Mean Girls, you have lived under a rock. Queen Bees and Wannabes is the book that Mean Girls was based on, and I have heard nothing, I've never gotten a chance to read it, but I've heard nothing but great things about it, because it talks specifically about how boys tend toward physical aggression, while women tend towards relational aggression. I have to constantly please my peers, because if I don't, they're going to spread a rumor that I slept with the whole football team. I have to make sure that I'm constantly perfect, or the girl in my group who decides that she doesn't like me is going to tell everybody that I cheat on my tests. We have to be perfect and really good people pleasers in order to make sure that we fit in with other women. Comparison is such a big part of the feminine culture. What woman in here has never compared herself to somebody else? Never a hand was raised. Upward and downward social comparison. I'm better than that person, I'm worse than that person. And it's a part of how we're socialized. And so if I want to be better than somebody, I have to be perfect. I have to be the best friend, not just a friend. I have to be the top of the class, not just in the top 2%. So can anybody else think of any gender issues, gender rules, roles, expectations that might get people into the triple P trap? Yeah.
Just had a story that I took my mother when she was 101 to the Governor's Centenarian Conference. We sat down at a table. There was another family sitting across from us. And my mother, who was really a very good person, leaned over and said, "Do I look as bad as she does?" I thought, well, it never ends.
Yeah, it never does, even when we're 101. Isn't that maddening? But the good news is, as therapists and interventionists, we can jump in so that at 101 you don't have to stand across from the table thinking, is my face that wrinkly? Does it look like I need luggage for the baggage under my eyes? Like, we can help people, if not get rid of it, combat it. So, gender issues. I love myself some Shirley Temple. Girl rules. This basically is like the picture that tells me how we're socialized as women, right? And that's how we're supposed to be, consistently, not just when we're little girls, but throughout our lives. Cutesy and sweet, and nice, White, sugar and sweet. Sugar and spice.
Yeah.
There we go. Sugar and spice and everything nice. That's what little girls are made of. When boys get to be like bugs and worms and So here's some of the girl rules that I came up with that play into perfectionism and people pleasing that you have to help your clients, especially your women, specifically your women, to understand that these are rules, whether implicit or explicit in their lives, so that they can start to work against them. Be nice, which remember, not just be nice, be nice! Don't call attention to yourself. Put other people's needs first. Oh, you can do better than that. And then making indirect queries for what you want, so using manipulation or subversiveness or covert means to achieve what you want. Mind reading. I cannot even get into mind reading because I will get into it later in the presentation because it is something that is super, super prominent in your people pleasers. And then we have a really big emphasis on how we look at our image. And so perfectionism is embedded in body image issues and self-esteem issues. What rules can you guys think of? Explicit or implicit rules, either that you were raised with as women, that you saw your sisters raised with, that you raised your daughters with, unknowingly or knowingly, about what it means to be a good girl. Yeah.
Other people's time is more valuable than yours.
Perfect. Other people's time is more valuable. Yeah.
We must suffer for our beauty.
Suffer for beauty. Corsets. Elizabeth fell off the rocks, right? In Pirates of the Caribbean because of the dead corset. She almost died. That's left to us. Right? No makeup today. It could kill me. Other rules. Yeah.
My mom told me a lot. That's not ladylike.
That's not ladylike.
Or something like that.
Cross your legs. Have you heard that? You're advertising if you don't cross your legs. That's like a vulgar one, but that's a girl rule, right? If you're sitting like this, what are you advertising? This is not very comfortable. Yeah, we sit like a lot, but how comfortable it is to cut off circulation in the bottom of one leg and the top of the other. Did you have one?
Oh, don't ask too many questions or argue or do that stuff.
Yep, don't ask too many questions, don't argue. Do you know how much joy it gives me to see girls on the debate team? It's so awesome. And it's so different. Notice if you ever go see a debate tournament for a friend or a kid, notice how differently the girls argue than the boys and why. Yeah.
So I know I learned from my mom and sisters and others that all these things, even if you said them out loud, but this is noble. This is, I know I do that, but we're supposed to.
Self-sacrifice. That is the penultimate girl rule. You need to be self-sacrificing so that other people can be happy. And when taken to the extreme, just like any of these things, these can be good rules. These can be. But they become rigid. No, I can't do anything other than nice. I always have to be self-sacrificing. Okay, here's a little self with the therapist work. I might have already outed myself, but the reason why I love doing this work is because of this lady right here. When I was 13 or 14, I was at girls' camp. And we had that oh so wonderful thing where you have to write notes to everybody and tell them what you like about them. And one of the girls who I looked up to told me I was like Mary Poppins because I was practically perfect in every way. And at the time I was like, yes. My life goal at 13 is complete. But now I'm a recovering perfectionist. And when I think about that memory, I cringe. Because I don't want that to be my legacy. I want people to like me because I'm real, not because I'm a porcelain doll sitting on the shelf that everybody admires but nobody ever wants to play with. What about you? And I've already asked you guys this question, but this is a really important self with a therapist piece because if you don't recognize and work on your own perfectionism or people pleasing, you're going to unknowingly reinforce all your plans. Make sure that you're really on top of it so that when they come late for your appointment, and as a therapist, you're like, score, she came late to an appointment, this is awesome. But then you're like, oh my gosh, she thinks my time is her time, and you're just angry about it because you're a little bit of a perfectionist too, and everybody should be on time because that's a perfectionist. So let her be late. She's late. Sweet, you're late. I had a client come 15 minutes late to a session today, and I told her, if you're here, you're not on fire. Victory. Right? Sometimes my perfectionists need to know that even though they make mistakes, I still accept them, which means I have to accept imperfection myself. Okay, getting into the treatment approach. Here's where CBT comes in. Since we're running short on time, I've got a lot of good stuff on this half, and I'm just going to go over this quickly. If you guys want this presentation, I'm happy to email it. Just grab one of my cards or contact Laura. Laura's got my email address too, and I can get it to you. So this is basically the cognitive process. Most times, is this like a laser pointer? Is it the little star? I don't want to push something and like have my computer explode. Okay, pointing finger. Okay, most of the time, we recognize this little blue circle and this little green heart. Something happens, I feel something. But that's not at all how our brain works. Something happens, and then here we have our regular filter. It's kind of yellow, so you can't see that's what it says. Regular filter. This is a product of our personalities, our previous experiences, and our values and belief systems. So everything that happens is going to go through our regular filter, and the filter determines what direction either we process it healthily or we process it unhealthily. People that struggle with mental illness, like depression, anxiety, OCD, our clients, they have an extra filter, and it's extra, extra thick. And so not only does it have to go through their regular filter, it has to go through their mental illness filter as well. And then down here, these little purple circles, this is where we make meaning of what happens. Here we have healthy meaning making, and here we have unhealthy meaning making, which easily enough we just term cognitive distortions. That's an unhealthy way of making meaning of something. Our healthy will usually feed into our positive core beliefs. Sometimes it does feed into negative core beliefs, because if we're realistic and we're not narcissists, we all believe some things about ourselves that aren't exactly fancy, but they're true. So we're going to have to process that, and then it's going to feed into or trigger a positive core belief or a negative core belief. I tell all my clients the Native American story that every man has two wolves inside of him, every woman in this case. One that's positive and one that's negative. And the one that grows is the one you feed. There's a limited amount of food in the cognitive process, and if you're feeding a ton of food to the negative core beliefs, this one grows and this one shrinks. It doesn't just stay the same, it shrinks. Because there's only so much that you can feed it. And if you're constantly processing things in an unhealthy way, you're constantly feeding this. And so you feel crappy. You feel bad about yourself. You feel afraid and scared and depressed and anxious. And then, I need to add these lines in, so feel free to do it yourself. Feelings and core beliefs are going to feed back in to our filters. And we get really messy when these things that are based on cognitive distortion start to feed into our regular filter. Because then we believe things that aren't true. And we believe them very firmly because they're a core belief.
Say that one more time.
We start to believe things that aren't true if we process things in unhealthy ways.
Wait, but what's feeding back into saying when our feelings?
Feelings?
Feeding back into the mental.
Yes, feelings, and then our positive or negative core beliefs will feed back into our filters. So if we start believing things that aren't true, we're going to perpetuate that process. If I believe that I'm not good enough, so I feel crappy about myself, and those things feed into the next time something happens, I already know that I'm not good enough, and I feel crappy about myself. So if someone tells me, Karen, that's a great presentation you gave, and I'm like, ugh, I only had time to do 20 of my 29 slides. And that's all I can think of because I don't believe I'm good enough. And so even if somebody tells me something good that could be this fabulous wolf over here that we want to feed, I don't believe it. And so it's filtered out and doesn't even get to get processed at all. So we want to help people first recognize this process. I always intervene here because it's hard to intervene with feelings because sometimes we feel and we don't know why. But if I can intervene and help you process your thoughts effectively and healthily, I can help you change the way you see the world, see yourself, and see your relationships. So that's where I jump in with, click 1,000 times, there we go. Core beliefs. This is where you go in and you dive into what these people believe about themselves. Have them make lists. A list of the good things you believe, a list of the not so flattering things that they believe. Both positive and negative. Make sure to tell them it's okay to have both for balance. Again, we don't want to create a bunch of narcissistic sociopaths. We want them to be balanced. I can believe bad things about myself, or not so flattering things about myself, but I can also believe that I'm capable of change. That's a balancing positive core belief.
Could you give some examples of these beliefs?
I'm not good enough. No matter what I do, I always fail. People aren't safe. People will abandon me. So basically, anything at the core of some of the issues that you guys treat. If you worry that something bad is going to happen whenever you disagree with somebody, there's a negative core belief down there. If I disagree, people will reject me. That's a negative core belief.
But oftentimes, right, you have to help them get to those because they
Yes.
just know, I don't like to disagree. I don't like compromise.
Yes, they just know, I feel bad when I do this. So you have to explain that cognitive process in between and help them identify. Sometimes they'll come up in session and you can point out, oh, that's a negative core belief that you have. You keep telling me that even though you got a 98%, that it's still not good enough. So your negative core belief is, unless I'm perfect, I suck. Unless I'm perfect, I'm gonna fail out of my classes. But you'll be able to start pointing them out, and the more you point them out, the more they're gonna be like, oh, that's a negative core belief. Oh, I get that. So it's practice in session. And then this is also where you dive into messages from their family of origin, other memorable instances like if they were bullied in school, or if they have any trauma that has helped create negative or positive core beliefs. Mostly negative. It's a lot of work in the negative. Okay, everybody familiar with the cognitive distortions from David Burns? I'm not going to waste my time going over them. This is where I introduce them to my client. I give them a handout with each one on it, and then an explanation and a few examples of each cognitive distortion, and then their homework is to go home and that week pay attention to how many times they do what and keep a tally. They don't have to write down the instance, just put a tally mark next to it. And if you don't know which one it is, put a tally mark in the corner, because it'll help them first recognize my thinking isn't healthy, my thinking is dysfunctional. And then when you recognize it, you can start to fight back. So I've come up with a couple of techniques that you can use to help people fight back against their cognitive distortions. Give a brief description because I'm already running out of time. Okay, reality checking works for all the cognitive distortions. And they ask themselves one simple question. Sometimes they have to ask you and other people in their lives that aren't perfectionists or people pleasers because they'll answer distorted. So, is this really true? Oh my gosh, my husband came home and he was upset about something. He's got to be mad at me. So that seems really real to somebody who's a people pleaser. He went, it means he's mad. I'm a mind reader, I know it. But it may not necessarily mean that he's mad. And so if I stop and say, you know what, is that really true? Is one mean, Carly, I'm angry with you? Well, not necessarily. It could, but it could also mean a lot of other things. And so you're basically getting them to question the way they think so they can determine if it's healthy or unhealthy. Next, with all or nothing thinking, you teach them to live in the gray. The world is not black and white. But you know what? There's some things that we think are pretty black and white, like murder is bad. But there are certain situations where if somebody breaks into your home and threatens your family, that you have the right to defend yourself, even if that means taking a life. There's soldiers in combat who, for their country or for the safety of other countries, take people's lives. It's not as black and white as we think. This is an extreme example, but perfectionists and people pleasers need extreme so they can do some of the softer stuff. Okay, overgeneralization, you just have to empower them that just because it happened once doesn't mean it's going to happen forever. You have the power to make different choices, which is going to lead to different outcomes. For mental filter, I call this the lawyer technique. I claim these, I don't know if they really exist, maybe I borrowed them from Burns, so don't quote me on this. This is not like the Carly LeBaron's Bible to treating perfection. So the lawyer technique, with mental filter, you're basically filtering out everything that you don't already believe. If you were a lawyer and all you did is gather evidence for the defense, if you're the defense lawyer, how good of a lawyer are you going to be? You are going to get your butt kicked every single time because you aren't taking any time to see what the prosecution is developing. So this is what I teach to my clients. If you want to be a good lawyer, you have to look at evidence from both sides. Look at the good as well as the bad. Okay, with disqualifying the positive, you're going to do a lot of work helping them reinforce their positive core beliefs. Grab onto something that's existing. I very rarely will find someone that doesn't believe at least one good thing about themselves. And if I can reinforce that for someone, or if I can help them create a new one, I trust Carly, and Carly says I'm a good person, and every time I see her, she smiles, and she tells me how proud of me she is because I've been working really hard. Help enforce those things just in the day-to-day interactions that you have with them. And talk about it explicitly. Next, with short conclusions, both mind reading and fortune telling, have them come up with 10 possible alternatives other than the one that they're thinking. So if my husband comes home and goes, oh, as he walks through the door, I have to think of 10 other things other than he's mad at me that are plausible, and maybe even more plausible than the one I'm thinking. Maybe he had a fight with a coworker, maybe traffic was really bad, maybe, you know, somebody spat on him, I don't know, like, and it helps sometimes get ridiculous with them. Help them think, like, maybe he got abducted by aliens and then came back and forgot his Coca-Cola on their dashboard. I would be super bummed too. Help them come up with something. Break them out of their cognitive rigidity. That's the point of this. Okay, with magnification and minimization, I see a lot of this with comparison. They'll magnify their own faults, minimize their own strengths, and then magnify someone else's strengths and minimize their faults. And so they're comparing apples to oranges. I'm going to compare my highlight or my bloopers reel with your highlight reel, and this happens a lot on Facebook, right? Everyone on Facebook, their life is so great. So you want to have them compare apples to apples, their strengths with the other person's strengths, and their weaknesses with the other person's weaknesses, because it creates a broader spectrum for them to understand. Next, with should statements. You will get shoulds all over your therapy room with this population. They will should every 15 seconds. Well, not that much. Some people will, like every word they say is, but I should have been nicer. But I should have tried harder. But I shouldn't have said that to them. It will be shoulds. Help them relax their rigid rules. They get very defensive if you try to get them to not should. Because it's like, but I'm not supposed to have morals? That's the black and white thinking coming out. So you can have morals, just relax a little bit. So if I should always be nice, you can transform that into, well, I'd like to be nice as much as possible, but I don't have to go out of my way to be nice all the time. It's exhausting. Help them just relax their rules a little bit. You can even have them write a list of all their shoulds, and then help them, I did this with a client today, help them figure out how they can relax the standard a little bit so it's not so constricting. This one is my favorite. I just started doing it a couple weeks ago. I see a lot of emotional reasoning with my eating disorder clients. So here's an example that I used this past week. A girl comes to me and says, every time I eat one of my challenge foods, and challenge foods are bad foods, according to eating disorders, I feel guilty. And I say, okay, tell me what you ate. I had a Snickers. And I say, okay, Susie, I have to tell you something really serious. I had Snickers today. Oh my gosh. I'm so relieved. It feels so good to finally have it out there. And when I say it like that, they look at me and they're like, and then you shot someone? Like, like, you're teaching them there's nothing inherently bad about eating a Snickers. There's nothing inherently bad about disagreeing with somebody. There's nothing inherently bad about asserting yourself so that you can get a promotion at your job. Helping them understand the difference between I feel, therefore it must be true, and I feel, so maybe it's true, but let's figure it out if it is not. Okay, I love this one too. Labeling and mislabeling is usually, I call it being a teenage girl. I broke my heel on women's school and it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. That's labeling and mislabeling, right? It's putting so much emotional emphasis on an event, on a person, on a mistake, that you freak out. So I say, ask yourself this, would a teenage girl say this? And if the answer is yes, you're probably overreacting just a bitch. And again, my teenage girls love this. They think it's hilarious because they've done it or their friends do it all the time. And my mothers love this because their teenage girls do. And my college students love this because they were there before once and they did it too. Okay, personalization is kind of a strategic intervention that I use. That they say, I didn't fix him dinner and he must have like felt so discouraged and so much like I didn't love him. And I say, wow, how did you figure out how to manipulate other people? Like, what, do you have like a magic wand? What do you do to make people feel something? Because I'd like to try that out. Like, give me hints and tips, and it helps them understand I don't have power over how other people feel. I can have the exact same situation for probably 10 of you in here and have 10 completely different reactions to it. And it's not because it's in my power to make each of the 10 people react differently to it. It's because each of the 10 people has their own stuff. And that's magical to a perfectionist or people pleaser. Okay, at the beginning of every time I do therapy with anyone ever, but especially with perfectionists and people pleasers, I always externalize their perfectionism. Because they identify this, hello, my name is perfection. But we need it to be something outside of themselves that they fight. Otherwise, they're trying to find a part of who they are. Hence, Mary Poppins. I can talk about Mary Poppins and not get really defensive about her when I say, like, man, she's a pain in the butt. Don't you hate it when people are practically perfect in every way all the time? Like, that's annoying. Okay, another technique that I use frequently with my perfectionists is the mask activity. I have them on a piece of paper or with craft supplies, whatever I have available to me, create a mask. And this is usually after I talk to them about how perfectionism helps us hide. Perfectionism is a protection. So I want you to draw what you use to hide, to protect yourself as a perfectionist. Sometimes it's a big smile, sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a super fancy Venetian mask. And then I have them hold it up and we do some experiential work with it. What does it feel like to be behind the mask? What does it feel like to take the mask down? What's different between you and the mask? Helping them figure out that this is not a part of who they are, but a defense mechanism that they use to protect themselves. Next, this is one that I do pretty far into treatment with a perfectionist. It's what perfectionism looks like and feels like versus what real looks like and feels like. I take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle of it on both sides, and have them draw either pictures or words or anything they want. What does it feel like to be perfect? What does it look like to be perfect? And then on the back, what does being real look like? And what does being real feel like? I really want to overemphasize for them the difference between being real and being perfect. And usually when you're far enough into treatment, they're going to know. They're just going to know my perfectionism looks like straight A's. It looks like smiling faces. It looks like always being conscientious. How it feels. I'm exhausted. I feel like crap about myself. I'm anxious all the time. I'm depressed. And on the other side, being real looks like I usually get like the theater masks. I can be happy and sad, or I get a variety of different facial expressions because I have permission to be any of those things. And feels like it's usually relief. Relief is a word I hear all the time with my perfectionists in recovery. I feel so relieved. Okay, I like this one. I came up with this word because it's so imperfect, and I freaked out the first time I said it, and I was like, that's not a word, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna use it. Deperfectifying. This is practicing imperfection, and the more of a perfectionist you have, the smaller you have to start. So I have clients, especially women, spill something on purpose and leave it there for 10 minutes. And it can be Cheerios or it can be hair gel on the carpet. I don't care. You pick what you want to spill, just leave it. Paint every fingernail but one. For guys, you're like, so? But for a perfectionistic woman, it's like, but why? Why would I ever do that? I'm like, okay, do it. Like today, I didn't repaint my toenails even though I thought it. Not a one of you has looked at my toenails today, have you? You don't know that my toenail polish is chipped. You don't like me any less because I just admitted that to you. It's something small that the women that you treat can do that's not going to have a giant effect on her life. The Q-tip example. I have a perfectionist that I'm treating that is going on a trip, and I said, everything is usually ordered perfectly in your suitcase, isn't it? Well, yeah. I said, do me a favor, when you go on your trip, I want you to take a handful of Q-tips and sprinkle it on the top of whatever you finish packing. And her face, I wish I had a camera and could take pictures in therapy, because it was horrified. Like, I had just suggested that she murder a baby chick. She flipped. Well, why would I do that? Because nothing bad is going to happen if you sprinkle Q-tips around. Are they going to spontaneously combust? Are you going to lose the respect of all your traveling peer mates because you had Q-tips all over your suitcase? I make things so much bigger because it makes them ridiculous, and once they're ridiculous, they can it. Then move on to bigger things. Be late to a lunch date, deliberately flub a few words during a presentation or while talking to coworkers, or go a whole day without wearing makeup or wear your hair in a style that you don't think is very flattering on you. Bigger things that, again, she'll probably freak out still, but that she can experiment with to see that it's not perfection that makes her likable. And then daring to be average or creating a mediocre bucket list. Your perfectionists, especially your high-functioning ones, have like 5, 10, 15, 50-year plans. So help them sit down, especially during summer, and write a mediocre bucket list. Play in the grass. That's your goal for this week, play in the grass. And they're going to freak out, because that's not productive, and I can't be lazy. Lay in the grass, go for a walk, write a letter to a friend. Mediocre. Dare to be average.
So what about and I don't know if you do a lot, but the perfectionist that doesn't do it because of the fear of failure. So they are mediocre and they are average. And how would you do that?
I would still do the exact same thing because I'm giving them very small goals. And if they go home, here's the kicker, and I'll tell you, this is my advanced secret about treating them. Any homework you ever give a perfectionist is a no-fail homework. Because if they do it, you win. If they don't do it, you win. That's the strategic awesomeness of homework with a perfectionist. Because no matter what happens, they're going to come back either having done the homework to be imperfect or having not done the homework and they're imperfect. So let your low-functioning perfectionists go home with a small goal. And if they can reach a small goal, you're helping them build a positive core belief. I can do things. And then eventually you're going to move them up to bigger goals. I can do hard things. And if you're building that, that paralysis is gonna start to go away.
Sure.
Yes?
This could be taken that, and I know you're not saying this, that high achievement is always dysfunctional. I just wonder how you differentiate, high achievement, which
That is
often valuable.
That is a perfect example. All of my perfectionists will say, so what, Carly, you want me to like be a bum and live in a van down by the river? And I say, yes. I want you to be a bum who lives in a van down by the river. No. Perfectionism can be functional or dysfunctional. We're talking about dysfunctional perfectionism. There's a piece of us where Mary Poppins still plays a very important role in my life. They got me to do this presentation before today, which is awesome. Because I could have just waited and been paralyzed, like, oh my gosh, it has to be perfect. And like not done it, or not shown up and hid my face, or shown up and like, I know exactly what I'm talking about. There is function in perfectionism, but it has to be more of progression rather than perfection. That's your goal with your perfectionists. See it as progression, as working towards the goal, rather than like, I have to be there now. If I'm not there now, I'm a horrible person. Okay, I'm not going to tell you why. Have them read the Velveteen Rabbit. You're going to thank me later. If you don't know what it is, you need to read it too. It's a perfect example for what they need to be shooting towards. Anyone know the Velveteen Rabbit? Okay, good. This doesn't sound crazy then. All right, with people pleasing, you want to do assertiveness training with them. Step 1, convince them that being assertive is not being mean. Step 2, repeat step 1 until you die. This will be probably the hardest thing you do with your people pleasers, is to convince them that being assertive isn't mean. So what you're going to do is you're going to differentiate for them here. Being aggressive is I care more about myself than I do about others. Passive is more about others than I do about myself. And assertive is I care about both equally. And so the third one is you're going to help them practice in real life situations, like use something from their real life and have them practice in session. You be the one who is assertive, so you can model it for them at first, and then you're going to switch roles so she can practice being assertive, and you can say, can I go to the store today? It's not being assertive. I'm going to the store today. That's assertive. You can help her kind of shape that behavior so it's a little bit at a time, a little bit more assertive than the time before. Have them practice being softly assertive. There is no such thing as just one right way to be assertive. You can be very soft. You know what? It's really important to me that you sit and you watch our son while I go have a meeting. That's very soft, but it's still assertive.
Yeah, I did something right, so I'm going to share it. But that's what I did with the client. She was super scared, and I said, why don't you just say, I would prefer this, but I'm more than happy to do it your way.
Yeah.
And she was amazed at how many people were like, oh, okay, we can do that. Like, people were coming around to her, and she was like, oh, okay.
This is magic! Yeah, it's like awesome for them. You can still be nice and be assertive. They're not mutually exclusive concepts. And then give her a homework to practice in real life. Help her learn to say no. This is a magic 5-word phrase that I teach all my people pleasers. When somebody asks you to do something, the first thing that comes out of your mouth should not be yes. It should be, let me check my schedule. That gives them enough time and separation from the person and the situation to really think if it's something they can accommodate or want to do. Okay, there's going to be backlash. People will not respond positively to this. The people in their life will be mad, they'll be angry, they'll call you names. You're going to have clients coming back broken. If you don't tell them in advance, people are not going to like this. There will be unhealthy people in your life, or even healthy people in your life who are just used to getting their way with you. And so you have to practice, and even if you still feel mean, you're not doing anything wrong. Remember, the emotional reasoning piece. Prepare in advance. She's going to feel mean. You have to validate that for her. It feels mean, but it's not. But I know it feels real for you that you feel like you're being mean. Others are probably going to tell her that she's being flat out. You have to help her process that. And remind them it's more about them than it is about you. That's something I say so many times, it's like should be tattooed on my forehead. This is more about them than it is about you. And then this is a key. Authority figures are going to be the hardest people to be assertive with for people pleasers. So these are probably the last people that you're going to have them stand up to. Parents, big one. Professors, church leaders, anyone that they perceive as an authority figure who has more power than them is going to be the hardest to be assertive with. Have them start practicing with people either on their same level or a little bit lower. Okay, self-compassion and self-forgiveness is the crux of this treatment. You have to teach them how to be soft with themselves. Spend a lot of time with it. Throughout every session, you need to be teaching and modeling self-compassion. Be compassionate with them. Use the best friend technique. If your best friend were to come with you in this exact same situation, what kind of things would you say to her? If your best friend, excuse me, failed a test or failed a test, what would you say to her? You'd probably wouldn't say what you say to yourself, right? Or you wouldn't have any friends at all. You'd say, it's okay, you probably worked really hard and studied for a long time, and that was a hard test. That's how you're going to teach them to develop this little angel on their shoulder. The internal cheerleader or the internal therapist. And this can be someone that cheers you on, someone that roots for you to be successful. And I have a lot of clients that will come back and say, I was in this situation and I just thought, what would Carly say to me? So I let them borrow my voice for a while, but it has to be temporary because eventually that voice, my voice, needs to become theirs. Forgiveness is a process. Highlight that for them. They're not going to be perfect in their recovery, and I guarantee you they're going to try. Ask themselves, will the world end? Will anything spontaneously combust if I stand up for myself, if I disagree with someone, if I say no? Then have that perfectionist ask themselves, will this matter in a year, 6 months, 2 months, next week, tomorrow? And only give situations and people as much power as they deserve. Okay, homework is important, and I already talked about being strategic. You can't give homework there and fail. And if you can find a grammar error in this, you're a perfectionist. That's the first thing I saw, and I was like, I'm not going to use that. It doesn't say your. And I was like, done. Use it. Imperfect practice makes it perfect. Have them practice being imperfect a ton. They're going to go out and test the waters. Be ready for them to come back unhappy, scared, afraid, hurt, and provide the support and encouragement that they need in order to be reinforced. Even though you're imperfect now, even though you're not a people pleaser now, I still like you. Be that one voice if everybody else responds negatively. Allow them to be imperfect with you. If they're late, you're not on fire. Good to see you. Catch them people pleasing with you because they're going to do it. Give them permission to disagree and be angry. And I always use the example of the Carly Voodoo doll. You know what? I said a lot of hard things to you today, so if you're mad at me, I give you permission to go home and stick pins in your Carly Voodoo doll. Everybody does that. All my clients have one. And that gives them permission to be angry with me. And in that moment, as I'm giving them permission, they'll say, yeah, you were a little hard on me today. And I'm like, I know. It was, wasn't I? You can be angry. It's okay. That's going to help your people pleasers figure out it's okay for me to feel something other than like, yeah, you're great. They don't have to be that. Okay. I'm already like 5 minutes over my time, but thank you everybody so much for coming. And if you have questions or concerns or comments, please send me a line. And feel free to grab a card as well.